Hey, Thomas here with the Artisan Sound channel and another video for you. Now it's time to give you an update on the West Side Story sound preparation. We're in the process of producing West Side Story. Rehearsals are in full swing, and I have been working on the mic plot and setting up the board automation for our Behringer X32 console. And I'm going to show you in this video the three-step process that I'm using for that. And I've showed you some of it already in other videos. So here's my spreadsheet that is kind of the starting point of my work, where I've logged the entire show, scene by scene. Scenes are here, right here in this column. Music cues numbers are here. Music cues descriptions are here. And then here's an extra column where I put in what happens there. And I logged everything that might affect in one way or another the configuration of the mic input channels. And then I guess this is another just notes column. And then here I start basically with the microphone channel layouts. And I have for now I'm using 16 channels. And here is a backstage mic that I'm going to be using for any offstage voices that are happening in the show. And so basically I've worked my way through determining who is going to be in that specific scene. And I've broken down when it's a scene, I've broken it down whenever someone comes in or out, enters the stage or leaves the stage. And in the songs, I've broken it down whenever the configuration changes. So it starts, let's say, Jet Song starts with a solo, or actually it starts with dialogue over the instrumental intro. And then it starts with riff singing solo. And then everyone is coming in at one point, and so forth. So I've logged it. Sometimes I've put additional information there. For example, here, the Tonight song, that's the quintet. I put here actually bar numbers where things happen, and then the configurations here. And again, I logged everything back here, who needs to be participating and whose mic needs to be unmuted. And that tells me which channel it is over here. These orange highlights, I've used that to mark where mic packs have to be handed over between different cast members. And yeah, so that's that. There's usually enough time, hopefully there's going to be enough time to facilitate those mic swaps. I'm actually scheming to add another 4 mics for most of the run, so that we can actually make some of these really quick changes that would be necessary. For example, here, a little bit more convenient. Anyway, so this is my master information repository, where I put everything that I need to know. If you've watched other videos on this channel, you may notice that I don't have a column for the actual time offset. Usually I do that in the spreadsheet, but it's kind of like, it depends on how I work. And I'll show you in this video why I don't need that in this case and why I don't have that. So so just kind of go with that for the time being. So anyway, the next step then from here is transferring this into the X32 edit software and setting it up as scenes and snippets. And before we go through that, let me do one more thing, and let me explain those 3 columns here for you. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating cues in the X32, which can be manually recalled, or they could also be remote controlled. And I'll show you in this video both steps. Okay, so the manual control directly on the board, or the remote control, which we're using Qlab for that. So, and I've kind of decided when there are less than 4 mutes or unmutes at any time, then I'm going to just run them as a manual, as well as not manual, but as a direct mute of these channels versus creating an extra snippet for that. I usually don't like to do that when I run the show just manually on the X32, just because I find it relatively an extra layer of confusion if you have to remember that, oh, this action is, you know, a mute button on the mic channels, and then you have to search, you know, which one it is, versus just clicking the go button or pushing the go button on the X32 to advance to the next cue. I find that just for the way of freeing up my memory and freeing up, you know, just brain capacity. I like to free up as much brain capacity as possible so I can focus on what happens in the mix. And so in general, I prefer to just create cues for every single change that happens. So even if there might be just a single microphone mute like this here, or a single microphone unmute like this here, I would normally prefer to create an extra snippet and then just hit the go button whenever that is due. But since I'm planning for this show to automate everything through Qlab, it doesn't really matter if Qlab runs a command for recalling a cue, or if it runs a command, a MIDI command for muting or unmuting a mic. And it really doesn't matter how many mics are unmuted. It's really just a matter of how much work it is to set up the events in Qlab to automate that. And also the other criteria is if anything changes about the DCA configurations, and we'll talk about that as well. So the DCA group configurations change sometimes. From time to time, they change. And whenever they change, it has to be an X32 Cue, because that's a more complex set of parameters that needs to be saved and recalled. So you can't do that easily with direct individual commands. Anyway, so there are some X32 Cues here, and sometimes it's just individual mic channels, mutes and unmutes. And so that's what these three columns are for. Now that I have all this, I go into the X32 edit software, and I set up all of this as snippets and then turn them into cues. The only reason why I'm turning them into cues is that cues are more convenient to manually run on the board, because you can recall that, then it selects the next one and arms the go button to recall the next one, and so forth. So when you manually run the show on the board, cues are essential. If you're remote controlling everything, you actually technically don't have to go through the extra step of linking the snippets into a cue. But I'm doing it anyway because I want to have flexibility for rehearsal purposes, or whatever might happen in the progress in the process of the rehearsals. That way I can run it either way, and it's not that much extra work to do it this way. Anyway, so you always start out with snippets, and I have here my mute all snippet. The important thing to note about my mute all is that it only affects the mute parameter, and only on the channels that are the mic input channels. So by contrast, if all the other snippets here, I have checked the source and scribble parameter as well as the groups parameter, and that allows me to reconfigure which channels are routed to which DCA groups. And then so that I can also relabel the mic channel tags as well as the DCA group tags. I actually also include the DCA groups 2 to 7 or 2 to 8. It doesn't really matter. If it doesn't change, it doesn't change. But I'm including all of these in all of the other snippets except for the mute all. Now I noticed that there is a danger when I was working in this X32 edit. There's a danger that when you recall mute all here and then you create a new snippet, the problem is that you now have inherited the lack of including what I actually want to include, which is short scribble groups and the DCA groups in that next snippet that I would set up. So that's something I kind of learned the hard way, because I created a bunch of snippets that I didn't notice I wasn't including these parameters that I wanted to include. And then I was making complicated changes to the DCA groups, and I thought they were saved in the snippets, but alas, they weren't, because I had clicked the mute all or recalled the mute all snippet before creating a new snippet. So that's a danger, right? So if you recall any of the other groups, snippets first, and then you create a new snippet, you inherit whatever parameters are saved on this one, and just the next thing is saved like that. Okay, so that's that. And then, as you can see, so basically everything that's over here on this spreadsheet translates into that, and it's really real simple to create them. So basically, when you're in one of those, let's say you recall this one, you can just go, let me resize this so it fits into the screen properly. All right, so if you're doing it on your X32 edit software, you can kind of have these two windows kind of side by side. And so let's say you're setting up the prologue, or just, let's say you're setting up a new scene, and let's just say, let's just say we're going to be here at the very last scene, and you can see this is the configuration here, and the labels for the DCA group are showing up here this way. And let's just say you want to set up another scene that's after that, which there isn't one, but anyway, let's just say, okay, let's just say there's another scene with Tony and Maria at the end of this. So you would just kind of reconfigure whatever you need to reconfigure, push the mute, set up everything the way you need it, and then you right-click into the next snippet field, and then you name that. You name it whatever it needs to be named, and you hit enter, and you get this confirmation dialog here, and there's your new snippet. And you can see now this new snippet includes all these parameters, and you've just now saved all of these parameters as they are set up in the mix window on the faders, right? So you can also do this if you're running it, if you're running it right on the board. If you have the board next to you, you can also set up all these changes right on the board, and then you can save it in the X32 edit software as well. I strongly prefer to use the X32 edit software because it's just so much easier to type names and things like that. Like on the console itself, you have to set every single letter here with a combination of 4 encoders. And it's just really tedious and just inconvenient. So anyway, so now let me get rid of this snippet because we don't need that one. All right. So those are the snippets, and then I set them up as cues. And cues are very simple to create as well. So you just go, you select the cue. After which you want to insert a new one. Then you click add. You get to add what layer you want to, of numbering you want to add it. So we'll just keep consecutive numbers here. And let's just say we wanted to add a mute all, then we name it that, and then we right click this here and we select whichever snippet we want to associate with that cue, and that will be a mute all, and there you go. So that's how you create a new cue. This column here, I'm using this for any to mark the cues that don't have to be triggered manually on the console in the run of the show, because these cues, all the other cues that are in here, are basically triggered from Qlab and automated. So whichever is automated in Qlab doesn't need to be triggered on the board. And that's how I use that. All right, so that's that. So now, as you can see, I've basically transferred this first column here. I've created a snippet and a cue for every entry in this column, and the board settings just simply reflect whatever I've logged over here for who needs to be in there, right? Okay, so that's that. And then the next step, I need to change my screen sharing configuration here. So the next step then is to set up the automation of the X32 board in Qlab. Qlab is a well-known and widespread automation software or show control software that can run all kinds of things such as light cues and sound cues and so forth. And so I usually start with a template that was created for one of our stages at Artisan, but it doesn't really matter for the discussion here. So then the first thing I do is when I open a new Qlab file for the show, I just bring in all of the music cues and I just put them into a group here. So I have them in one place. And I use this for music rehearsals as well. So I can just simply play back from here and go into this level here and figure out where I need to start for the rehearsal and things like that. Oh, this is all okay. Let me see. Let me just fix this real quick here. In the workspace settings, you can come in here to the audio settings and select a device. And whenever you use the external speaker on the MacBook, it actually requires you to select a different output patch. So if you don't have an output patch selected, you get the red X's here, and now you can actually play this and it works. So there you go. So anyway, so then the next thing I do is I create a separate group, a small group right here for each of the musical cues. And then I make a copy of the music cue and put it into this group. Now, the way that you have to set up this group here, it's very important that you select in mode, that you select the timeline mode. The timeline mode means that when you hit go and this group here is selected, then all of the events that are in that group are triggered at to play, to start, and then you get to set an offset here. So for example, let's say the music starts and at the very beginning I want to recall cue number 1 prologue from the X32 Cues, and then so this would have no offset, no timeline offset. But if I need to mute microphone 5 a little bit later, then I do need a time offset, and I can put the time offset in. So if I figure out, let's say, in 30 seconds into the cue, I need to mute microphone 5, then I can set the offset here, and that means relative to the beginning of this sound cue here, exactly at 30 seconds in, this next MIDI command is then fired and sent to the console, and it will mute channel 5. Okay, so that's where the system or the information comes in that I used to log in other shows. I used to log that in the spreadsheet and have it available in the spreadsheet to just simply transfer into this place, into Qlab. But here I'm thinking I've just not had the time yet to time through these, and I'm thinking that I will probably just take the score and look at the timeline of the sound files in here and determine right from here what the timeline offset will be, because you can see here the yellow number. It will show me where whatever happens. And so if I determine by looking at the score that, let's say here, mic 5 needs to be unmuted or muted, then I can grab the time offset right from this timeline here and just say, okay, that's 51 seconds. So I'm just going to plug that in here, 51 seconds, and work my way through that. So I decided to do it this way, just kind of as a separate workflow. I find that workflow wise, it's easier to do like one type of work at a time rather than jumping back and forth between different types of attentions, you know, if you want to call it that. So therefore, I've decided for this show to simply just go through the entire show and take all of the events from my spreadsheet and put them in here. And don't worry about when exactly they need to happen. And then in a separate path through this data, through this information, to this setup in Qlab, I'm going to, like I just said, go through it with a score and with a script and determine where in each cue the offset needs to happen and what it is. You can see here a few of them I actually just kind of did on the fly, and they're already set up like this with a specific offset. And when you look at this, I don't want to play this so that we don't get copyright and problems with this video. But when you play this group here, it'll play, actually, maybe I can just, well, it doesn't matter. So if I play this group here, let me just start it like this, okay? So you can see now the time code here has started ticking for this cue. And once it hits 33 seconds, it will then fire this next event. So it has already fired this recall Q13 event. And in 8 seconds right here, it will then complete and fire this next event as well. And bam, right here, this one was triggered, right? So this is cool. And this is how this automation works by group. Okay, so I'm just working my way through here. I just wanted to make this video as I'm in progress here. You can see I'm kind of in the middle of, let's see, oh yeah, so this is tonight. So when it's a little bit more complex, I actually create a little subgroup within the group that holds the sound file. So here's the sound file. This is the master group for this music cue. And in the beginning, it's recalling Q24 from the X32 board. And then here, I put subgroups. And this is mainly just to help our light designer, because the light designer will then be able to just go in, oh yeah, I want to, you know, put a light here wherever Sharks with Nardo appears in measure 22. And you can see there's no time code offset here yet. That's because I haven't put that in yet. But once I put this in, the light designer will be able to just attach the light cue to this time location, and he doesn't have to actually manually spot it if he wants to work that way. Anyway, so that's what I'm doing here. Or even, you know, if there's multiple events that are attached to a specific thing that happens, like here, Anita, the section where Anita sings, and then it turns into the Tony solo for tonight. Tony needs to be unmuted, but they overlap a little bit. So I don't create two different events. I just mute Anita 3 seconds after I unmute Tony, and that takes care of the overlap, and I have it all in one event, and I don't need to, you know, think about what the meaning is of what, and that way it kind of makes it a little bit more manageable later. Let's say if there's some issue, let's say Anita is, you know, ad-libbing a line, which she won't in this case, but let's just say sometimes it happens, particularly in dialogue, that the actor is actually on a little bit longer than I thought, and then I can just simply go in here and say, oh, that was muted a little bit too early, so let's just add another couple of seconds here, and that'll take care of it. It's very easy to fix things, and they're going to be fixed for good, right? That's the beauty of automation, is that whenever you have a note, whenever you notice something that isn't quite perfect, you simply go in here and fix it, and then it's going to be perfect for every run after that. I'm going to link to a piece of documentation that took me a fairly long time to find. I was always thinking, man, there has to be something like this. And I was doing Google search after Google search and never anything came up until I finally found it. And that is the documentation for recalling cues. And so it's actually very simple. You send this as a program change command. So in MIDI commands, there are different commands. There are note on, note off, there are program change and control change. And that's pretty much the only commands that you'll need if you want to remote control X32. And it doesn't really matter from which software it is that you're controlling it remotely from. But so program change and control change are the most important ones here, according to the documentation that I was able to find. And again, I'm going to link that for you in the description. So recalling cues is happening on channel 3, and then the number that you put in here is simply the index of the cue in the X32 edit or on the console. And it's not the actual number that you put in manually, but it is the index. So it's whatever the slot is of the cue on the board. You know, it starts always with 0 and then just numbers through all the way to 100. And you can also do that with snippets. And then if you want to mute or unmute, you send this as a control change. The channel is not the microphone channel, but that is the type of control. So in this case, it's a mute. So channel 2 means we're affecting the mute feature of whatever we set here. And the control number, that is the channel on the board, except also this is offset because this parameter is working with indices, which means there's a 0 is the first one, is the first value. So that means parameter 0, control number 0 is channel 1. And so that means the numbers that you need to put into the control number are always 1 less than the actual number of the channel on the board. So if you want to mute 5, you have to use control number 4. You know, mute 14, you have to control number 13 and so forth. And then mute is high numbers mute the channel and low numbers unmute the channel. So this is the unmute is the same here. So the mute parameter is channel 2. The control number 13 is board channel, microphone channel 14. And then the control value is 0 for unmute and 127 for mute. You can actually also use other values, but I always just like to go for black and white. You know, 0 is unmute and 127 I use for mute. All right, that's all there is to explain here for now. I hope this helps you. I will add another video and show you how this actually works in action, and maybe I'll make one when I have everything figured out here and all the offsets, and I'll show you a little bit more and keep you in the loop on that. But if you have any questions or if you have any suggestions on how to make this easier, or whatever, any ideas or questions, please leave a comment below and like the video and share the video if you like it, find it helpful. And this is Thomas Bartke signing off from the Artisan Sound channel.